Hello and welcome to episode 31 of The Climate Skeptic. I'm your host, Laurie Wastell, an associate editor at the Daily Skeptic. Now, if at first your arguments don't succeed, try and censor your opponents. Well, we've long known that that is the modus operandi of the green blob. And nowhere is it more in evidence today than in the latest initiative by the so-called Good Law Project to censor and get taken off air the broadcaster Talk over what it calls climate disinformation. And to discuss that today, I'm very pleased to be joined by the Daily Skeptic's environment editor, Chris Morrison. Welcome, Chris.
Hi there, Laurie. Nice to be with you again.
Yeah, very good to have you here, Chris. So, well, tell us about this story. I mean, it seems an absolutely extraordinary and censorious effort here by the Good Law Project.
It is. It was... They've sent a letter to Ofcom, and their client is a small activist group called Just Stop Heat. I think it is. It's one of these small groups that Charlotte Gill sort of tries to draw lines between. They all pop up, and there's lots and lots of them. Anyway, this client, Just Stop Heat, has constantly complained to Ofcom, and this is the modus operandi of people like Hope Not Hate, of course, who are trying to sort of cut advertising at GB News and Talk, and they will phone up people and say, why are you advertising on these dreadful channels? And they have a number of lines of attack, and obviously going to Ofcom. And a Good Law Project has sent a letter complaining that there have been over 1,200 complaints to Ofcom over the last few years about a so-called, what they call climate misinformation, which usually means that someone's actually attempting to debate the settled science and actually be a proper scientist. But we won't go into that just now. So they will try and deluge Ofcom with complaints. This latest effort is they picked 5 cases where they say Talk has been particularly egregious. And my attention was drawn to that because one of the headline cases they use is that they said some bloke, some terrible chap, said that climate change is just a row of, doesn't amount to a row of beans. And that struck me as interesting because it was, in fact, me who said that, or rather didn't say that. They completely misquoted me. They can't even get their facts right. What happened was I was on Ian Collins' lunchtime program in November, and I said that the science behind a lot of the net zero promotion didn't amount to a row of beans, which of course is totally different. They also complained, for instance, that I'd cried wolf on a number of occasions. This is actually a complaint to Ofcom that I had cried wolf, whatever that means. And I suspect that it means that, no, sorry, I didn't cry wolf, but the activists were constantly crying wolf. And this, of course, is reference to the last 40 years. And Exhibit A on that is exactly their record over 40 years, where the corals are all going to disappear from the Great Barrier Reef, and the polar bears are going to go, and all these tipping points, and the Gulf Stream is going to stop. And none of these things, amount to anything. They complained also, for instance, about Rupert Darwell, who on another program said that they were scaring children basically to death. There was another one where Brendan O'Neill said that a lot of the scares around net zero at the energy policy were based on pseudoscience. This is all just, some of it's, I suppose, critical, some of it's fairly vigorous question of the science. But this is free speech. I mean, you're perfectly allowed to say that people are crying wolf over the climate crisis when none of their scares, come to pass. They're trying to clamp down on free speech. And what they do, of course, is they say, because Ofcom is partly to blame here, I mean, to their credit, they seem to sort of kick most of this stuff out, or just ignore it, or just say there's nothing to see here. But one of their requirements is they do actually say at one point that the science behind anthropomorphic human-caused climate change is broadly settled. They call it a theory, in fact. Well, that's wrong for a start, because it most certainly isn't a theory. It's a hypothesis, which is a much lower form of scientific opinion. And of course, what the people like Just Stop Heat, the Good Law Project, then claim is that therefore, because it's settled under your own statement, any criticism of climate science that doesn't go along with the settled narrative is somehow against the broadcasting code, which is just crazy. I mean, the idea, for instance, that any proper scientist, a scientist concerned with the scientific process, will tell you that there are no facts in science that are settled. There is no fact in science that cannot be challenged.
Well, I mean, just one of the things here that I think is worth mentioning, Chris, it's quite a funny name, Stop Funding Heat. I mean, we're, coming towards the end of winter now, but we had a particularly cold January, I think, and we're in a cold country in the northern hemisphere. Actually, we quite like heat, don't we? And I mean, it's just almost a very revealing name here that it's almost saying the quiet part out loud, I would say, in that what the initiatives that these people are backing would indeed make it much more difficult for us to have enough money to do things like heat our homes.
Well, I mean, we've talked in the past about the absurdity of the net zero fantasy. I mean, they are looking to ban hydrocarbons. Hydrocarbons are the basis of our modern society. It's not just heat. You're right. It is energy, of course, and we use it to heat our homes. To be fair to them, of course, they're referring to the heat in the atmosphere, I guess. They have this theory or this opinion that if you increase carbon dioxide, you will lead to runaway temperatures. The problem with that opinion is that it doesn't actually bear out to any past observations going back 600 million years. And there's obviously an element of saturation that you see with these gases. But nevertheless, they've used this as a political program in order to produce this net zero fantasy. And the net zero fantasy is that you control hydrocarbons, if not remove them. And once you control energy, you also control, or through hydrocarbons, you control where people travel, where you control their diet, you control everything. And you place them in a sort of, if you like, a prison where the state dictates exactly what you do and where you do it. It's the sort of neo-Marxist dreams come true. And this is what we've seen. So a lot of this is really sort of hard left. You see it, for instance, in the mainstream media. I talk about how only GB News and Talk are covering the climate science in any proper way, proper journalistic way. But you are starting to see mainstream media moving away to an extent from this. The Washington Post, for instance, has just cut its reporters on climate from an incredible 30, I think it was, to about 5. CBS in America has also cut its climate desk. If you look even at the BBC, you look at their climate page, you see a lot less of this nonsense about polar bears, disappearing and all of the tipping point stuff that the climate page was full of 2 years ago. They tend to talk about heat pumps and all these things, which aren't really about climate at all. You don't see very much from a lot of the journalists that were reporting quite regularly. So it has slipped down the line a bit, but I mean, there is still, say, a great deal of commentary designed to promote net zero.
Quite, and of course, net zero is held up to us as this kind of ideal state, this almost utopia where, yes, there might be some tremendous transition costs that is perhaps acknowledged by the slightly more sensible net zero ideologues, but that if you can only get to net zero, then suddenly, the energy system will be solved and you'll have renewables that go on forever and have low maintenance costs or something like this. It's not really very well worked out. But as you've been pointing out recently as well, it's a total myth that once you achieve that, supposedly, that this will actually reduce the costs, and that's all that need be done.
Yes. Well, the problem with that is renewable energy, as we're now finding out to our cost, is the most expensive energy available. It has very low kinetic value. It upsets the grid. The more these sort of bizarre forms of energy you put into the grid, the more it upsets the frequency, and that can lead to blackout risks. Obviously the wind and the sun, are irregular. The wind can stop in this country. It hasn't, thankfully, in the last winter, but it can stop in a period of very cold for a week or 2 weeks, and we would be left in Miliband's world without energy. What's interesting, I find, actually, is that dear old Dale Vince has started now talking about, perhaps you ought to keep the oil and gas going a bit. People like Vince are now working out that his subsidy-ridden 76 aging fleet of onshore wind turbines, for which he's collected almost 150 million pounds of subsidies over the last 20 years. He has kind of worked out that the wind doesn't always blow, and he relies on oil and gas. So he is now talking about, and they're starting to shed these crocodile tears, not just Dale Vince, but the Labour Party, about towns like Aberdeen, which are being bombed out. Aberdeen is now a tragic case of a net zero town that is going to be destroyed. It was a small fishing port in the 60s. It developed as the oil capital of Europe, and now, of course, is being bombed out. It's the only place last year where apparently house prices declined in Scotland. And so you start to see, elements of the Labour Party starting to realise that the deindustrialisation that's come into a town near them, because the car industry will be destroyed, the chemical industry will be destroyed. And once you lose chemicals and steel and oil and cars, you've lost your industrial society. You will never get them back, because unless you erect enormous trade barriers and are prepared to do without them while we build new car factories. Because obviously you're giving the rest of the world, your competitors, in some cases possibly your enemies, a head start. And so people like Dale are now starting to talk about, we still need to keep a bit of oil and gas going. Of course we damn well do, Vince, I would argue. We need to keep a great deal of it, because when your wind turbines don't blow, we need oil and gas at the moment to power up to 70% of the grid. Up to 70%, and yet we are not actually extracting the stuff from underneath our own feet. So reality is starting to dawn there, I think.
Although I suppose, Chris, it does speak to a tremendous myopia in these types of Labour politicians, trade unionists, and people on the left in general, that this project has been rolling on for decades now, and coming to the conclusion that people like us have been pointing out again and again, and then suddenly, actually, towns like Aberdeen really are facing complete industrial collapse, and it takes this for people to notice. I mean, it's quite extraordinary.
It is extraordinary, and I think that it is because we still assume that the Labour Party is what it says on the tin. It's a party of Labour, and of course it isn't anymore. It's lost a lot of the working class vote. It's very likely